Hey everyone, it's Spencer and welcome back to my shop. We are going to take another look at my Z50R today. If you joined me last time, I appreciate you watching along. I built a titanium muffler for my exhaust system, and today naturally I'm going to make the header for it. So let's get started. You may have noticed that the center hole didn't fall out on the first cut that I made on my plasma table, so I altered the program, ran it again, and then after doing some sanding and filing on this, here's the completed flange. And the plasma table doesn't do the cleanest job of cutting out aluminum, but with a little bit of sanding and file work, I think I made it look pretty presentable. I've already machined the titanium piece that goes up into the cylinder head. I put a pretty big chamfer on this leading edge so that way I could slide a piece of 1-inch tube up through there. I've got to machine the outer diameter of the 1-inch tube a little bit to make it a tight uniform fit through there. And I'm going to weld it along the top edge and then machine it back flat again so that it sits up against the exhaust gasket smoothly and flat. This is what I've got going on my bandsaw. I've got the vise kicked to 9 degrees because they're opposing cuts, which equals 18 degrees per pie cut. What I did was draw a line at the halfway point up the full length of the tube. And what that allows me to do is put a mark on the vise that you can see right there. That is going to line it up every time that I flip the pipe. So I'll keep flipping it back and forth like this. I've got a line on both sides all the way down the tube. I bring it out to the stop and let it run, and I get one of these. This one's already been cleaned up and ready to go. And now let's cut a whole bunch of these things. I'm going to cut about 15 of them, even though I shouldn't need that many. If you've never seen a pie cut exhaust before, it looks something like this. Now what that allows me to do is stack the pieces together however I want to create a pretty complex bend that you couldn't achieve by just doing like a two-dimensional bend with a mandrel bender or pipe bender or anything like that. So it allows me to kind of manipulate the pipe the way that I want to and make it fit exactly the way that I want. I went ahead and welded the head pipe into the flange. I welded it all the way around on the inside of it to give it a smooth transition. And then I also went ahead and tacked on one of these pie cuts. I was playing with the diameter of this aluminum flange that we cut out earlier on my plasma table and making sure that it would fit over at least one of these bends. I want it to be able to be backed up a little bit so that I have room to weld this first pie cut all the way around without this flange being in the way. So now I have to do a whole bunch of running back and forth. I'm going to time lapse through a lot of this. I've got to weld on a whole bunch of pie cuts, and I'll be running back and forth between the bike and my welding bench, just checking fitment and clocking it around until I get it where I want. I've got the initial part of the header on the bike, and I'm playing around with the routing. I want to keep it as tucked in as possible, so if I low side the bike, the header's not the first thing that touches. When I put my foot out from the peg, I don't kick the header and melt my shoe on it. And also, I'm playing around with this pie cut right here and kind of clocking it around and trying to figure out where it goes to keep this pipe routed up underneath the tank, tucked away as much as I possibly can so I don't burn my leg. What's nice about pie cuts is that you can see that that's just one curve right there. I followed the center line for every one of those pie cuts that I scribed on them earlier. But now I have the ability to clock the next series of pie cuts wherever I want, and basically what you end up with is a complex compound curve. And so instead of it just being straight right there, I can actually make it wrap up and around however I want. Kind of like that. That's on my three-wheeler, and I made a really complex curve right here to keep it plenty out of the way of my foot when I'm using the brake. This thing doesn't have any front brakes, so I rely on the rear, so I needed it out of the way. That's the same kind of principle that I'm following on my Z50.
After I was satisfied with how I clocked around that last pie cut, I went ahead and added the straight piece of tube that'll lead to the next bend. At this point, I can go ahead and basically weld out the rest of the header. I'm doing full penetration welds here. I like to use about a 1.5 amps per thousandths of wall thickness. Works out pretty well for me with a Furic BBW cup for shielding, and I have it back purged as well with the silicone TIG Aesthetics purge plugs that you saw, and an aluminum one too that soaks up the heat a little bit better. Then I can take the thing back over to the bike and start working out my next series of pie cuts for the last bend, as well as the slip joint that slides into the muffler as well. You can see that I'm just clocking it around and taping it until I'm satisfied with the way that it fits.
Now that I have the rest of the pipe roughly mocked up, I can tack this stuff into place after I do one more final check of the body work. Because I had to pull the muffler just a little bit to get all these pie cuts to line up, pretty seamlessly. So I'll tack them all into place after I check the body work, and then put the pipe back on one last time and make sure everything fits up the way that I want it to. After doing the final welding on the header, I went ahead and mounted the entire system just to make sure it still fit correctly, and it does, so I'm pretty pleased about that. The whole exhaust system only weighs 1 pound and 7 ounces, so it's pretty lightweight, and that's really what I was going for with this build. If you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe. If you haven't checked out my other videos on this build, please do. There's some good stuff in there, especially if you're curious on what all I did to this bike. But we still got a good bit of stuff left to do, and we'll keep plugging along, but we're getting closer by the day. Take it easy.